We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Social justice, power word, power word, power word. Social justice, power word, power word, power word.
Good evening to our friends on the East Coast. Good afternoon to our friends in the West, and good in between time to our friends in between spaces. Welcome, 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 welcome to the Social Justice Power Hour. Welcome to the Biodressin Center for Social Justice virtual headquarters. My name is Robert Say the Schreiber. I'm the chief activist here at the center, and your host for this evening, as I have been for the past 300 some odd episodes, many of them very odd indeed. We've done this for the past year and a week now, without missing one weeknight, bringing to you live community building conversations as meaningful as they are fabulous, as entertaining as they are empowering, and I want to thank you all for joining us. Tonight's a special one. Tonight we have Dave Cullen with us, the author of Columbine and Parkland. Given the past few weeks and the tragedies our nation has faced, we are honored to have this conversation. It's going to be difficult at times, but also there's a hope that runs through Dave's work and his feelings about these things that I think will persevere and help us all through this. So I'm thrilled to have Dave with us. And before we start, I do want to tell you a little bit about the Power Hour, because I know that Dave has a lot of friends and followers and fans and readers who are coming out for the first time to the Power Hour. So I want to tell you what we have going on. As I said, we are here 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, every single weeknight live to you. Last night we had an extraordinary show, by the way. We had the Trans Day of Visibility special, where we highlighted the past year's worth of wonderful members of the transgender community has come out and shared community with us on the Social Justice Power Hour. And it was co-hosted by our own Biodressin Center for Social Justice board president, Erin Worrell. And I want to thank Erin for coming out. I want to thank all y'all for coming out. We had 1,300 people who have viewed that program since last night, and we're really very honored that you shared that community with us. And if you didn't get to see it, it is available on our Facebook page, as in all of our Power Hours previous. And this is what's coming up on the Power Hour. Just give me a hot minute to share this with you. Tomorrow night, we have David Brzezinski. As every first Friday, he brings us First Folk Fridays. David Brzezinski, renowned folk musician, to ease us into the weekend. And then coming up further on the Power Hour, we have Disha Fila, who is the author of Secret Lives of Church Ladies. We have Hala Alan, who's the author of The Arsonist City. Wonderful. Jennifer Armstrong, When Women Invented Television. Punch Me Up to the Gods. This book is going to blow up, and I cannot wait to talk to Brian Broom about it. John Doe, fresh off of being with Jill Sobule last week at our Jill Sobule After Dark All-Star Benefit Concert. John and Jill are going to come back and do a concert, just the two of them. John Doe from X, you can't get better than that. And the fabulous Wayne Brady will be joining us as well. And finally, please do save the date. Virtual Pride is coming up sooner than you think. So be ready to be out and proud. June 12th, save the date. You remember how fabulous it was last year. If you missed it, if you were among the 10,000 who came out and marched with us in solidarity and danced with us in celebration, do mark your calendars this year for June 12th. That's just a little bit of what's coming up in the Power Hour. There's a whole bunch. There's a heck of more coming up on the Power Hour. So please do be here every weeknight, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. But tonight, as I said, with everything that has been going on, really excited, inspired, and looking forward to this conversation very much. Dave Cullen, second lieutenant in the U.S. Army, a fellow at the Dart Center for Journalism and Trauma, author of Columbine in 2009 and Parkland, Birth of a Movement in 2019. After 3 mass shootings here in the United States just these past 2 weeks, in Atlanta killing 8, Boulder killing 10, California just last night claiming 4 more lives, there is literally no one better to engage in thoughtful conversation about how we can move past these tragedies, how we can gain solace in the present, and how we can look forward to meaningful change in the future. It is no longer enough to survive. We need to look to each other to thrive. As Patrick Ireland, who was severely injured in the attack at Columbine, stated so eloquently when he was named valedictorian, quote, "When I fell out the window, I knew somebody would catch me. That's what I need to tell you, that I knew the loving world was there all the time." End quote. So tonight, in the hopes of continuing to build that loving world that Patrick saw, that Patrick believed in, we welcome author and gun safety advocate Dave Cullen to our Power Hour. Thank you, Dave, so much for being with us tonight. We are so thrilled to have you here for conversation.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So what really appeals to me about this, I want to cut right to the quick, that you wrote these 2 books that in another's hands, in another's type, could have been heart-wrenching and hopeless. And what they were, in your words, were heart-wrenching, of course, because they had to be. But they also were equally hopeful. You found this incredible balance. So that's the first thing I'd love you to bring to our community. How did you find that hope amidst the tragedy?
Well, it was a lot easier with Parkland, which is why I did it. You know, I didn't plan to write a book ever again. No, in fact, I swore I would never write another book on that subject. And I actually had because I had a 2 different breakdowns, I had like a rule. I agreed with my shrink that I would never go to the scene of a crime when it was still kind of hot. I went with I'm on the board now of a group at John Jay College in New York that studies 1 incident a year. And I went to Virginia Tech a couple years after it happened for a 3-day conference. And we studied the Norway shooting, actually in New York City, and the Las Vegas one. So we do these really in-depth studies, which are great because I'm normally the only journalist there. And it's off the record, and it's normally academics and shrinks and the people, the victims and the survivors. And so people who would never talk to journalists about this stuff or never talk in that way. You know, it's a very open, candid conversation about what they went through and learning from them. So I do that, but that's about as close as I'm sort of allowed to get. But then after Parkland, my editor, who's also one of my best friends, said a couple days after, maybe on Saturday, I know you're not allowed to go back to these places, but would you consider going back this time? And I thought about it, and you know, I've been thinking about it because, and I said, okay, I'll go back not to document the pain. You know, I'm not going there to write a story about like what it's like to, you know, survive one of these things again, or the killers. You know, the killer, I just don't give a shit really about him, and I'm not, you know, going to look into him at all. But something was happening with those kids immediately. And I was fascinated and really kind of excited by that and enthused. And I said, okay, I'll go down and cover that. And I was late for my Gay Soldiers book already for HarperCollins. So I didn't want to, I was making good progress and I didn't want to interrupt that. But I said, so I made a deal. I said, I will go for 5 weeks, just up until through the march on Washington. And so that was the assignment we agreed I would do, I think 3 online pieces. And then help them, you know, produce a video documentary about it. And that would be the whole thing. And that was all I was going to do. But, you know, as soon as I got down there with the kids, I was just so taken by them. And it was just so extraordinary. I knew pretty early that I was going to continue beyond that. And we were talking pretty quickly with Vanity Fair as I turned these in to do a much longer, deeper story for the print magazine. And so then they assigned that, and I worked on that. And I said, okay, I can, work on this a bit longer. And then, while I was working on that, then I decided, like, wow, this is amazing. I think I want to do a book just documenting, because after 19 years in, there finally was, really cause for hope. And, somebody, they got sick of, waiting for the adults to do this and, said, get out of the way, we're going to do it. And that was extraordinary. And so, the second book, I set up to something completely different, which was not about, the topics that Columbine was about, which Columbine was half and half about the killers and why they did it, and then the survivors and what sort of became of this community. And, the survivors and the recovery. And I didn't, want to do either of those things. It was just about the kids responding. So that made it very easy to write, I set off on a hopeful story. With Columbine, it was a lot more difficult, and it's nice to hear you say that. I don't want to say I had to dig and search for the hopeful stories, but I knew, they're there. In anything pretty much in life, there is the good and bad, happy and sad. It sounds cliche as it's coming out of my mouth, but it definitely is true. And think about some of the worst things that have ever happened to you. Often there is a silver lining. Usually they either lead to something or something happens in it which is uplifting. It's always there if you're not sort of like focused just completely on the one obvious thing that's huge in front of your face. And in Columbine, Patrick Ireland was the biggest uplifting story, and he just made an amazing recovery. There were other amazing recoveries, so he was sort of like the representative of that. But so I think, really, to be honest about in these situations, you have to look around and see the full picture and find, some of the most powerful stories in each way. Dave Sanders' story was sort of like, pretty horrific. And Linda Sanders, his widow, her story was pretty rough. She's never gotten over it. And there's no happy ending there. It's, just getting progressively worse. But in general, really, the kids were more resilient. And Patrick, was just so, screaming out that story. And, I think for just like accuracy of presenting a picture, I want to find those different, stellar ones. So I look for the really powerful and interesting and compelling ones. And, his was just like a no-brainer. To me, the main thing was like getting him to participate to do it. That was, the hard part. Although sometimes it just, it wasn't as hard as I expected, but it's just, it's always there. You have to look at the whole picture.
There's so many threads I want to pull at, and there's so many things I want to ask you and talk to you about. There's so much conversation to have tonight, but I want to do this, and forgive me if I'm barking up the wrong tree, as it were, here. You mentioned your Gay Soldiers book, and first of all, I want our audience to know that you put this book that's so dear to you, and we'll talk about that in a moment, on hold so you could tell this other story. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge sacrifice for you, right? To not, because this story's been boiling up in you. You were a gay soldier and you wanted to tell that story. And this is a story that needs to be told for so many reasons. But probably for you personally, it's very important as well.
Yep.
And now it's still on, we're looking at, a 2022 release now.
Probably. Maybe late 2022. At this point, it's, they gave me a when people ask me what my due date is, I'm terrible. But it'll, get finished when it's done. But like, they did send me a new contract. I signed a new contract with a new date. actually, no, maybe we did do it in a contract. When Parkland came, HarperCollins was under contract for the Gay Soldiers book, so they actually, did a contract for the Parkland book and did do a formal revision to the Gay Soldiers book, just to say we're kind of inserting this book in here first. Part of any book contract, including the one I had, is you won't do any other book first, for anybody. So kind of legally they had to. But then I think it was just an email, like they, just like with my agent agreed to a new date, and it might be like the end of this year. But anyway, that's what I'm sort of shooting for, is finishing by the end of the year, and then they generally want about a year until publication. For I want to do a lot of editing with my editor. She's really great, and then there's copy editing and legal review, all sorts of things, and then sending out the review copy. So maybe the Christmas time after this one or thereabouts.
Well, we want to thank you for that sacrifice, because
thanks.
Parkland is such an important book, and it gives us so much more to think about and to feel about and to understand. And what I wanted to ask about you personally, and forgive if I'm overstepping, but to me, I feel like your time in the Army as a gay soldier and your time having to be the other in that society, I think when I read these, when I look at these two books and I see your voice in these two books and I see the way you connected, both in the first in Columbine and in the second in Parkland, the way you connect with the students, but also the way that you refuse to, for lack of a better term, vilify the shooter, and you say we can't classify them as the other, because the other are the kids walking through the halls that aren't accepted by their peers.
Mm-hmm.
And do you feel that you gained that empathy through your life's journey, and that's why you were able to see that a lot more crystal than a lot of other people?
That's a really good question. That probably has a lot to do with it. I always felt like growing up, it was because I come from a family of 9 kids, and I'm a dreaded middle child. I'm 4th. And one of the things that middle kids often have is an ability to relate to other people. Is some of the oldest kids are really far away from the youngest ones, and don't always get them as well, and vice versa with some of the younger kids. And in the middle, we're sort of like the bridge between them, and sometimes with the negotiator, the family, and sort of like growing up that way. But I don't know. I've always been really sensitive and fascinated by other people, and like putting myself in kind of in their shoes and imagining what it is and what it's like to feel for them. So who knows with I think, the gay thing may well have been, and you know what, and so many gay guys are, gay people in general, I think, probably even more so with transgender people. I didn't even know I was gay growing up. I'm laughing again because this is like a cliche thing, but I just knew I was different. And I felt like a different species or something, totally felt like an alien. And I've always been kind of an outsider in everything. But I always, my friends would joke that I liked playing against type, that I worked for some of the most conservative companies, and I was always the most sort of crazy, wild person there. And they're like, wow, but I like being, I've always enjoyed being the one that's different. And I feel like it does give me a way to observe. And, they used to say about de Tocqueville, it took somebody from outside the U.S. to, see us, and, I think being an outsider always has, it gives you, or feeling like an outsider, it gives you a different kind of perception Yeah, because I'm sort of always, I've been sort of like an anthropologist, a cultural anthropologist since I was, a kid. I mean, by nature, when I was in college, when I first heard the term, I took my first anthropology class freshman year, and the day I heard the term, probably the first day of class, participant observer is, what they called it then, of like what you did. And I was like, it was like hearing like your own name for the first time. I'm like, that's a job? Like that's sort of like, like what I've always just like done, as a human being. That's like how I, I connect with the world, like jump into like these groups to sort of like participate just to see what it's like, and then go into a different one. I've always been like a flitter, like a little butterfly, instead of like, being in a group. I've never been one of those people who runs with a social group ever, which has been, problematic during COVID. Like everybody's in their little pods. I'm like, well, I'm flit between them. And then actually like later, it was Laurie Anderson, the singer / performance artist. She ended up marrying Lou Reed. But she's got a spoken word album, which is amazing. I think it's called The Ugly One with the Jewels. It might be one of the other. She's got more than one, but I think it's on that one where, maybe it was, anyway, one of the sort of a spoken word thing where she's saying, God, I forget exactly how she puts it. She says something like, I always considered my primary job is spy. And she means cultural spy. And she talks about like one of her favorite listening posts is airports, and just observing. And when I heard that too, again, I was like, oh God, that is exactly what I am. And by then I, worked as a journalist in various different things, and sort of like, and just sort of study people then like, to write about them. But first, to sort of like experience their world and dive into these worlds. For a while when I was like, before I became a writer, I was a management consultant, went to Kuwait and Bahrain for a couple of years, and loved immersing myself in different places, and, sort of like figuring them out and sort of like translating between. So I've, kind of always been that guy. And yeah, I have a feeling that, being gay and being sort of like feeling like an alien soul on this planet was maybe my way into that, because I feel like I've just been sort of like that cultural spy since day one, and gradually over the course of my life figuring out like, well, I can do that as a profession. And then it's like, you really have to then like, find out how, because it's not, there's not a job listing for that. But, for me, it was sort of like doing the journalism thing and then taking it in kind of a different direction and doing different stories than were assigned. Like with Columbine, really, in a way it got going because the book and a lot of things got going because the first week, I mean, I lived there in Denver, and I just drove off the afternoon when it happened. I saw the local news, and I was one of the earliest journalists out there. There was maybe like a dozen of us when I got there, and like hundreds the next morning. But so the first week I did one story a day, like just, pounded out the story and, found a new topic and wrote about, researched it for a couple hours and wrote about it. And then by Friday, I was looking for something meatier and, deeper to spend more time on. And I wasn't sure what even to call it. So I was talking to my editor, Joan Walsh, who went on to become editor-in-chief there. She's kind of an amazing writer, and now she writes for The Nation. And I guess she's a CNN analyst. But, I said to her, like, I don't even know what to call this. I think sort of like the God thing. And she was like, oh, wow. And I was like, she's like, I've been thinking the same thing. And I'm like, well, I didn't really suggest it because I don't even know what I mean by that. But there seems to be like so much of this evangelical stuff that I'm hearing, and this is really somehow connected, and I'm not sure. And she said, wow, she said the reason I didn't suggest it because I was the same way. Like I was thinking something is going on here, but I didn't even know what to suggest. But she said, if both of us are sort of getting that, I'm getting it through the television from San Francisco, is where she lived and worked. and you're getting on the ground there, that it's definitely a thing, and we need to do that. And then I wasn't sure what it was, so I spent the next month just immersing myself in the evangelical community. I enrolled in Bible study at Cassie Burnell's church. I called up the pastor, who was the evangelical, the young girl who supposedly said she believed in God and became this Christian martyr. Later, I was the one to break the story. It wasn't true. I had no idea that was going to happen. But anyway, I called the pastor up, who led the Bible study every Wednesday night. They were studying the book of Revelation. I said, I'm a reporter. I'd like, writing a story about this whole, community, and could I come? And he said, sure. And so I spent sort of a month doing that. And then I did long, immersive piece, about 4,000 words, that led to a lot of other things. But that was my first kind of moment with Columbine, just going in the deep dive and doing a different kind of story, and one that nobody asked me to do, and that I didn't know how to do or what exactly I was chasing. But that's sort of like really been my career, and what I've done is like, I don't think I would ever have figured out how to like be cultural spy as a living. And I didn't think like, oh, I want to do this. So like, what, assignments can I do for cultural spy? It's just, this is where my curiosity is, where my interests take me. And when I want to kind of do something, just sort of suggest it and go do it and figure out how to do it. And crucially, not worry about how to get paid for it. Because I think Solana was paying me about $600, or maybe it was $800 a story then. I think it was still $600. So for a month's work, I got $600. But, I just, it led to lots of other things. Including certain sources, so that, well, in particular, the director of communications for the Columbine School District was really impressed by it and how fair I was to the evangelicals. And so when I suggested kind of boldly that I do the first in-depth interview with the principal of Columbine, he gave it to me instead of the New York Times or Time Magazine or 2020 or something, which was kind of like a coup. Which then I wrote the cover story for the local Denver magazine, 5280, and that got a lot of notice there, which led to a lot of other sources coming through and trusting me, and for a lot of things. So the story also won an award. So anyway, it's just not even thinking about the money or how I'm going to, make a living, but just going after those kinds of, just sort of following that path. And then they lead to things, and like, 10 years later, there was a book, not just specifically about that, but led to sort of like the sort of deep immersive, stuff that I do.
And I want to, we have a comment from Brian J. Jones, past guest in the Power Hour. For those who don't know, Brian is a wonderful biographer of folks like George Lucas and Jim Henson and Washington Irving. And he says, man, I love Dave Cullen. I think Columbine is one of the most important books of the last 50 years. Fight me. I don't think anyone's going to fight you, Brian. I think that we agree that it is an incredibly important book. And as our volunteer, Chris, in the comment section, thank you, Chris, for always being with us. We have a link to the bookshop.org where we have all our authors, including Brian, that you can buy the book as we're talking. You can click on this link as we're talking. You will not leave the conversation. You will still hear the two of us and mostly Dave talking at you, and you can buy the book. And these books are phenomenal. We're talking about Columbine and we're talking about Parkland, and they're both equally incredibly powerful and inspirational in their own way. With Columbine, you find you had to dig more as a cultural spy, as it were, to find it, but you found it. And with Parkland, it was there, and you just wrote the living heck out of it. Did you? And there's another question, but I want to ask you a question before I forget. did you get blowback from your editor or from friends or people that you were working with or for who are familiar with your idea of not casting a villain in the book, of not focusing? Because I feel like society, especially American society, always wants to place blame, always wants a villain, always wants someone to cast their aspersions, cast their hate toward. So that was a bold move. And was there resistance to it while you were writing?
No, not that. No. No. The only thing briefly with Parkland, well, it was like really with Parkland, just sort of like not including him. And I decided pretty early, I thought, didn't want to even name him. And I told my editor that pretty early on. And she was a little leery, and she didn't, it was just, she's great. And she didn't say like, oh no, you can't do that. She just said, well, we got to really think about that, because if you want this to be the definitive book on Parkland, that seems like a big sort of like missing chunk. And even including his name, we want to, it's, a document of the thing, and did not even have his name in there. And so I said, okay, and she said, just think about that as you're working on it. And the more I did, the more I thought like, it's fine. It's, that's not the subject here. And, I think I spent 2 pages just saying who he is and sort of the TikTok of the act of what had happened, just so you've got, the grounding of that, and then, moved on, but it's, not about him. And as far as like naming him, I feel like the more we're in this, internet age, is like, well, you can just Google anything. And, just try to project out what it's going to be like 10 or 20 or 30 years from now. Something is a historical record. What we do now will feel like child's play, I'm sure. Who can imagine what there will be? But, you don't need it. It's like, is somebody going to search the book for the names? They can just search anywhere on the web for. So I decided, that was just sort of like, not an issue. And by the time I wrote it, and then I turned it in, I'd sort of like forgotten and just decided like, that's not an issue. And she never even brought it up again, when I sent the stuff in. She read, and I think it's always the proof in the pudding, if I could do another cliche, is like, in the early stages when you talk about, I'm not going to do this or not that, like, it can be a little scary. Like, well, will that work? Because, will it work? Until when you get a manuscript and you're just reading, not that I turned it all in one time. I was like shuttling. I think I sent her half, but with big chunks missing. And then, she edited that. I did the other half and then started filling. And so, but as I was sending her things, she was like, yeah, this is working. And, it didn't feel missing. And so even that was just sort of like early on. But no, I've worked with really good people who sort of like what I'm doing and support it. Yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. I'm glad about that. And because it is such a different way. And I can't imagine, I think there are few folks who would have that epiphany of not naming and not including. And I think that's why these books, as Brian says, are, both so important and will be testaments to this time. And speaking of this time,
well, I'll tell you one more thing actually on that subject though, of like, because I forgot now. I actually forgot with Columbine. I'm trying to remember when it was in the process. It might have been after I turned in the manuscript, or maybe when I was just before I did, when I was like doing my quick whittle down from 975 pages to 900, and then cut it down to like 350 after I added about 200 more. So we threw out about 2/3 of the copy. But somewhere in there, one of those reads when it was pretty much done, and I was sort of reading back, trying to do what I do is like trying to be a surrogate reader, like pretending, I'm just reading this for the first time and how responding to it. And I remember coming across a line that was about Dylan. I don't remember what it was, but it was really sarcastic, well, kind of bitchy. and just sort of sneering and sort of like, you know, contemptuous and kind of making fun of him. And I realized, like, ooh, that's all wrong. And I had made myself a rule, actually, early on. By early on, you know, I spent 5 years. There was a failed book attempted this at Random House. An entire, you know, wrote it, edited, didn't work, and went on. So this was a completely, you know, second attempt was starting year 5, but so early in there, I decided, actually very overtly, that I wasn't going to have any judgments about any of these people. And in particular, one of the survivors, the parent, is kind of, well, he can be a real dick. And by the end, everybody was sick of him. And even with him, I was like, just, you know, put his actions down and like his actions speak for himself, but I'm not going to like express any opinions on that or, you know, be contemptuous in any way. But so I'd made that rule about everybody, but the exceptions were the killers, because they murdered a bunch of people, and like, you know, they didn't deserve that. You know, they hadn't earned that. I could say, you know, I could have any opinions I wanted on that. So that was my rule going in. And then 3 or 4 years later, as I'm reading the manuscript and struck by this line and realized, wow, what a mistake that was. And that, you know, I realized specifically with Dylan, the more, well, what I was trying to do with the killers was get you as close to them as possible. And my idea was, I didn't even want you to be like a reader, like right in their face, looking into their heads. I wanted you to be like in their heads, looking out at the world and see the world from Dylan's point of view and Eric's point of view, to know what it's like to be a killer. So like understand what drove them and why they did it. So that was also sort of like a going in position on what I wanted to do with the book. And it was only reading it that I realized how badly in conflict those are. And that every time I sort of like sneer at either of the killers, and, you know, just deride them, I'm widening that distance. I'm getting you to not relate to them and not see things from Dylan's point of view. And as soon as I saw that, I realized, you know, it's not just Dylan, it's both of them. I'm like, I knew instantly, like, oh, I've done this a lot, haven't I? But I just definitely had that moment reading the one line, like, that's a huge mistake. I want you to be Dylan as you're reading it, and be Eric, and, you know, see what it's like for them, so you can know, like, oh, that's, you know, that's why the hell this, you know, guy did it. And then, you know, you can form your own opinions on it. Like, I don't need to tell you that, you know, a murderer was a jerk or, you know, what have you. So then that very afternoon, I just went back through, you know, on a search and destroy mission for any of those, you know, just sort of sneering, you know, author being in the way, really, and took them all out. And then as we went through the edits, you know, occasionally I'd find a few more and just like those, you know, all going. So that was really, I'd forgotten, actually, it was quite a while now. I'd forgotten what a conscious choice that was, and then, you know, a need to edit myself and find when I was doing it, and, you know, get all that crap out of there.
I mean, and that, again, I think that was such a pivotal epiphany for you to discover that in your own work, and then go back and actually excise all the, and I think that's why these are such important pieces of work. And I just want to brush on this for as long as the moment takes us. But does it make you tired to see what's happening these past couple of weeks? And, you know, literally as the world opens back up, even the smallest amount, we have 3 more incidents. And I thought 2 things. I thought, gosh, I am so I'm trying to think the right word. I'm glad that we have you coming up on the show, because I feel like you can bring our community so much, especially with the empathy you show in these 2 books. But then I thought of you as well, and that empathy went out to you, and I thought, gosh, out of all the folks witnessing this must be a devastating moment for you personally.
Well, I appreciate you thinking that. You know, it's interesting you started with the word tired because that actually, sorry, I'm just reclining here, and that's a pretty good word for how I do feel about it. Yeah, just kind of fatigued by it. And God, I have to admit something horrible I already did on Christiane on my poor show, but which happened right in the wake. I think it was on the day after the shooting in Boulder, and I don't know if it's because I lived in Boulder for about 8 or 10 years, and in Denver, Boulder together for like 15 years, more than I've lived anywhere else since it's from my childhood. I don't know if it's that or it's because we had the year off of like our COVID year of like, oh, nobody's in school, so nobody's shooting schools, right? Or really public gatherings, and there, we sort of had a year off. Not that there weren't any mass shootings, sadly, but there weren't any of the monumental, devastating ones. For whatever reason, I'm just numb to it. I haven't been able to experience this last round, other than, I was going to say anger, a little of that, but I can't even, my body is still sort of like refusing to go there, which is, it's, I don't want to sound unfeeling, but sometimes I just can't. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know. Also, this has happened to me a few times before, and it might also be because I spent big part of the last, spent 13 months doing a piece on Gabby Giffords and really on the gun safety movement for Vanity Fair, which I started right after the day after after the Dayton shooting, after El Paso and Dayton happened back to back. I started on that and then got so hopeful about what's going on and what we're sort of on the brink of changing. I don't know, quite the brink, because there's like with the 50-50 Senate and, Joe Manchin and certain others being part of it. But we're getting closer. The political gravity has changed so much, and the NRA is not at all as a shadow of what it was just a few years ago. So, and Gabby's just such an inspiration. She's just, I mean, if you experienced her on TV or what, is one of those people like in person. She's just this singular being. She's just quite extraordinary, and will just never give up. You can literally shoot her in the head and leave her for dead on the ground at a parking lot, and like she's gonna get up and beat the hell out of you. All right. She's really something, and really have a great sense of humor about doing it, and about everything. But so I guess maybe because I've been so hopeful about it, and then bam, dead people again, and I just feel fatigued and just like, oh God. So yeah, I mean, I feel like we all have our moments, and I'm just like in a pause where we have to keep doing something, but I'm a little out of steam at the moment for it, and trying to do what I can, but sometimes I run out of gas for a while.
Well, that would make complete sense, and I would think, and I don't want to bandy this term around lightly, but I would think there's some PTSD about it too, that you've bear witness to this. As you said, you were, I believe you said you were in Columbine, just a few hours, that you were one of the first on the scene, as it were. So there has to be, and to process this, and I know that part of what you do is go on TV, and you're the person, you're the go-to, and that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and I wrote about that in Parkland about Columbine, what it did, but I don't, and I wish not, I'm not even sure what I wrote. I think I gave sort of an incomplete picture there because I'm just trying to think now. I don't know, I can't believe I never put this together before. Because early in the book, in the prologue, I talked about what I had gone through, and it was not that. But the missing piece of that is that, the process of writing the Parkland book really healed me. Like, not completely, just like, and so like being like maybe like a cancer survivor, it's okay to compare. Like, you're never like, you know, completely well, but like so much more well than I was before, which I didn't even realize how much, you know, dark crap I still had in me from Columbine until the Thanksgiving after. It was a phone call with Alfonso Calderon, one of the founders of one of the kids. He was a junior, and very, very funny. So using a great kid, and talking about what would come through that year. And I said, like, you know, actually, I'm in such a better shape. Like, you guys have really healed me. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah. And he talked about more where he started crying. Yeah, they, you know, but that's sort of like one of those completely unexpected, you know, and maybe, you know, of all the people he, you know, was trying to help, you know, I was maybe sort of like the least deserving or necessary part, but you know, you take it where you can get them. And we spent so much time together, but they really, that was the biggest antidote I've ever had that I never foresaw. And as I was talking to you, I just realized, like, oh, I don't think we put that in the book, because I'd written the prologue like you know, 5 months earlier about, you know, the Columbine stuff, and really I was only realizing that about it healing me, you know, as we were putting the final edits on it, it was going to press. So I'm sure I didn't go back and rewrite then, like, oh, by the way, the process of writing this book really sort of rescued me. Yeah, because I didn't really know it till I was finishing up. So it's not in there. I just like, I'm sort of like, God, that's sort of like I'm missing. But you know, maybe I can, you know, put that in the next one. Oh, by the way, yeah, maybe we should write like an epilogue at some point in that book, because it really did. And like that, I mean, of all the things that happened to me along the way, covering a second one, and the first book did a huge number of, like, I mean, pretty much screwed me up mentally for life. And the second one, and I remember talking to my agent about it, who's sort of like my career advisor, kind of my manager too. And you know, early on, I was like, is this gonna fuck me up even more? And it didn't. It did the opposite. It helped, like, you know, cured some of what the first one did. And like, I didn't see that coming. Which is also just one of those things about nice, like the last thing I expected was it would actually make me better. But it did, you know, because those kids, because they were doing something. And plus, you know, kids are just, you know, I spent so much time working with high school and college kids, and they're just really, they're just wonderful, you know? They're honest about things, they're excited, they're like sponges who want to dive, they want to learn. And yeah, so and particularly these kids were just kind of amazing. So yeah, it was great to tell their story and to kind of amplify it. And
it was just, it's amazing, because it was under the worst of circumstances, as you said, under the darkest of clouds, there was this silver lining that you saw absolutely immediately, and allowed yourself, as you just said, to heal. And then you allowed, and I don't think that I'm overstating it here, you allowed the nation, allowed us to heal as a nation, allowed the world, because the world looked upon this as well. Do you look at the kids now? Do you look at Emma and David and all the rest at what they're doing? Is there a pride to that you feel? Is there
oh yeah. Yeah, much more of the other kids too. Like I mean, Jackie Corin of all of them, I think, is my biggest hero. Who was she sort of became the hero of the book because she was sort of like unsung. You know, I viewed her like the producer behind it, and particularly like you know, Cameron, you know, sort of organized the kids, and they were mostly friends of his, either through most through drama club or through the their online, the news sort of studio. And so they're almost all kind of performers. And, you know, the whole thing is like, you know, you bring a bunch of actors together to do something. They're going to have like all sorts of great ideas and improv and like bouncing ideas. Like it'll never get done, right? Like you need somebody to produce the thing who will be like, schedules and time and locations and booking a venue. They did this 2-month road trip that summer across the country, the Road to Change. And Jackie organized the whole thing. But every city they went to, like while they were driving to a city like hundreds of miles, she's booking, arranging things for that day, but booking the next, 3 or 4 down the road. But yes, like she's the producer, making all this happen. And for the most part, like nobody ever heard of her or knew she was there. And I mean, she was on the famous cover of Time magazine with the 5 of them. She was one of the 5, so she was always in the picture. But then getting ignored, like they were going to like David and Emma, and sometimes to Cameron. But people like her and Alfonso and Daniel Duff and just like all of them. It was such a and Matt Deitch and his brother. There was about 25 of them. And like a huge part of like what they did, and like the first, I bet, so a week after they did, or like 6 days after, they went to Tallahassee. Well, Jackie arranged this. 3 buses, I guess, with 100 kids to go to the state legislature to get something changed, because the Florida legislature only meets something like 12 weeks a year, maybe 2 years. I think every year. It's one of those, and then we're like 9 or 10 weeks into it. So they had like 3 weeks and then done for a year. In which case, it would be old news, and they would lose the momentum. Nothing would happen. So they had to go there immediately. The organizational meeting that I flew down and was at the organizational meeting. They were mostly like really dressed up, and I'm like, why did dress up for this? Like, because they had just come from a funeral. So it's like, okay, more and more of our friends now go organize like how we're going to get on the buses tomorrow, how we're going to do this. But anyway, so like while I was interviewing just, tons of people through that whole trip, one of the kids that really impressed me, and I would interview them, and then I would ask them at the end, okay, give me your name and age and grade in school. This kid, Daniel Duff, freshman, and I think he was 14, I think, and I was like, "You're a freshman?" He just said all this incredibly articulate stuff, about just having met with the governor, and I was like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Oh, my birthday's next week," and he was about to turn 15. I was like, "Oh my god!" And I also reckon, I said, "Do you follow politics? Do you know who these people were?" And he was like, "Most of them know." He knew who the governor. Is it Tim Scott? Was he said like mostly because he looked like Voldemort. I was like, oh my god, that's freaking perfect. He's like, no, this is mostly my introduction to politics. I'm like, okay, and it's like, okay, I'm going to be following you. And then we literally followed him. So the day of the march, I thought about what will I write about? Everybody's going to have this story about the march, and it's going to be on television worldwide. So what am I going to write that's going to be different? And I decided, and I pitched to my editor who loved it. I'm going to follow one person, one of the kids, and I'm going to follow one of the people you haven't heard of. And it was going to be Daniel Duff, and he was going to go with his dad and 2 of his brothers and their girlfriends, and so we arranged this, and then, spent the day, we met them at their hotel for breakfast, and then, just like all the way through the day. Oh my God. I wasn't with him. My photographer kind of got himself into the restricted area where I stayed back, but, and they were up in the front with the VIP area. And so there was some woman, who everybody was taking selfies with them, and they were very there was a lot of Clooney was there, and lots of people like that were there, so lots of people were taking celebrities with this older woman, and it seemed to be a thing, and so Daniel took one. Now I can't even remember the order of this, but I guess he took a selfie. He and his friend took a selfie with her, and then somebody said, "That's Cher," and he's like, "That's Cher." Like he had heard of Cher and like knew who Cher was, but like, but you know, like, yeah. So I did. So yeah, I mean, you just can't even buy that kind of innocence or just like, yeah, I don't know. He's just like, yeah, they're, you know, kids like he wasn't born when Cher was having most of her hits. Anyway, so I don't know. I'm way off the subject, but how do you not enjoy a year of spending time with kids like that? And you know, and then who are perfectly happy to admit it to, like, yeah.
That's the gift you gave us. Out of that tragedy, I can't imagine anybody else who could have seen and given voice like you did.
Oh, thank you.
I think that you see that part of it, that you saw these kids not just as inspirational figures, because they were put on pedestals and people were, you know, oh my gosh, what you did that I think was magic is that you showed them to be just kids. And that story was so perfect in the telling, because that's what makes Parkland so special. Is it's not about giving all these kids halos and crowns.
Oh, no.
It's about saying they're wearing sneakers in the hallway. They don't know who the fuck Cher is. They don't know who the governor is, but they're doing the work because they know it needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, you know, I think the biggest thing I did too. Some people ask, like, how did you get them to cooperate with you and like to, you know, take you inside? I was the only journalist they brought in. Well, that they brought into their headquarters. The PR firm, Clooney's PR firm, like arranged an exclusive with Time, a print exclusive to do that cover story, and 60 Minutes, a TV exclusive. So they were both let in, and then actually the only person that the kids let in. And then it got found out, and so then they closed it down. So then no one else was ever in there. No, the reporter. But really, what it came down to, and I talked to some of them about this later, is like I never like talked to them like they were kids or treated them like I just talked or act. Well, but it never occurred to me. I wouldn't want to. I just treat them like people who you know, sometimes, you know, don't know some of the same things, you know, or like, and actually at one point too, you know, I was back with Jackie about a lot of things, like whether she was a producer or COO. At one point she was describing what she did. I'm like, oh, you're sort of like the COO of the organization. And she's like, what is that? And I was like, oh, you know what a CEO is? And like the, you know, COO does like sort of the more day-to-day stuff. So, oh yeah. And so I explained a little, and she's like, oh yeah. So yeah, sure. Sometimes, you know, they, you know, don't know all some of the same things, although they know a million things we don't know. But yeah, but like also don't pretend they know all the same things or they have the same cultural references, but don't treat them like, you know, the whole idea of children where as, you know, something lesser or, you know, talking down to them. Why would you even want to? Yeah, so I think just sort of like, but this is the same way I sort of treat my nieces and nephews. Is like, you know, other people who just, you know, other people, not this whole like concept of children. I think can be a little silly and demeaning.
And I think that's the perfect note to. I can't believe how quickly this hour is gone. And I want to thank you. And what a perfect note to go out on is talking about treating people as people, whether they're kids or whatever however they represent, however they identify, however they walk the hallways or the streets or whatever else it may be. And that's why, again, cannot recommend highly enough these two books. Parkland is honestly more difficult, but it's important in its difficulty. And then Columbine, and I'm sorry, Columbine is the more difficult.
Okay, good. I thought for me, but you know, I can't be
for us as readers, Columbine is the more difficult piece. But it's important to work through that process. And then, of course, we get to Parkland, where we see the hope of these kids. And I love the fact that they had a headquarters and they were organized, you know, and they responded. And as special as these kids are and were, they were just kids. And what they did is what I think almost any other group of kids would do. Because I think that's the potential that we all have within us.
and audacity to just do it.
So thank you, my friend, for being with us tonight.
This was great. Thanks. I loved being able to talk it more like the 2-minute sound bites or 30-second sound bites on a.
That's why we call it the Power Hour. We want to have these community building conversations, and this has been a very important one. And we really appreciate your time and your energy and your spirit. I'm going to say goodnight to our community, and I would love it if you don't mind, because I know we didn't get to talk in the green room before the show enough. If you would hang out just for a minute so I can thank you personally before you take the evening. Thank you, my friend. Our guest tonight, Dave Cullen, author of Columbine and Parkland, which Chris has put in the comments section. You can get those very easily on our bookshop.org book list, where you have all the authors that have been on the Power Hour, and these books are essential reading. Thank you, my friend. We will have you back on, I hope, when Gay Soldiers does come out, or if you want to share a chapter before, so we would love that as well.
Okay, good. Now I'm just taking it. I was trying to take a screen print, but I screwed it up.
I will send you some, I promise. I will see you in a minute. Let me say goodnight to our community, and we'll talk in a moment, my friend. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
So that's Dave Cullen, everyone. And now that he's not on screen, I will say again, these two books, Parkland and Columbine, really important additions to your library at home, and I cannot recommend them highly enough. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Again, these conversations are so important and so meaningful and so fabulous all at the same time, but again, only because you are with us. So we will be here for you at the Power Hour, and we ask you to be with us every weeknight, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Do come back, all y'all. Until tomorrow, be good to each other. Be good to your families, chosen or otherwise. And most importantly, and I think tonight especially showed this, be good to yourselves. You need it, and we need you here with us. Until tomorrow night, my friends, much love and respect.
We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.